We're now going to take a look at trailer air brake system components. So we've already looked at how the tractor system is set up. So our supply line, which is our red line, feeds a relay valve, which then will charge a trailer reservoir. And we need that volume in the trailer reservoir to be able to apply our brakes. We're going to take a look at two different types of trailer systems. A pre-121 system where we didn't use maxi pots, all we used were brake pots, and then we'll take a look at the 121 system where maxi pots are used. So if we just use the normal brake chamber, so on the front of the trailer we're going to see a red and a blue glad hand. We may also see a yellow glad hand. The yellow glad hand is in place, or if we have a set of sliding bogies, so we can adjust the trailer on these sliding bogies. On some that have them, they may not have a yellow glad hand. They may have a mechanical linkage, so we can disconnect and slide our bogies that way. But on the braking system, so again, when we take a look at how this system is set up, so this is a relay emergency valve, an RE6 and an RE8. Now how this system is set up, again, because we don't have maxi pots, we only use a single relay, and this relay is used to charge the trailer and act as an emergency, and it also acts as a normal relay valve. So if you take a look again, our inlet valve is open and our exhaust valve is closed. So if the trailer is sitting there in an emergency position, let's just say I've parked it, so air pressure from the reservoir that comes in through here can go out through this port here and out to my brake chambers to make the application. The problem with this is once the air pressure bleeds down, the trailer will roll away because the brakes will release. And this is why this system is very seldom ever used on a trailer. You might see it on a converter dolly, but this is an older system. So this is an RE6, RE8, a relay emergency system. So how it works. So first off is the supply port. When I push in the red button, air pressure comes through a screen. It goes and works on this surface right here, because this dark piston here can move up and down against this spring pressure. Air pressure also comes past this check valve, and when it comes past this check valve, it can go out and start to charge my trailer. So I push in the red button, air starts to charge the trailer reservoir if it's empty. Now what happens then is once system pressure gets above 45 psi, it pushes down on this piston. Below 45 psi, it just goes past the check valve and starts to charge the trailer. Now if the brakes are not applied, let's just say the reservoir was empty, what would happen then is air pressure would also go out to my brake chambers, and what you'll see is the brake chambers the brakes will start to apply, and then they'll release. And what happens then is as pressure gets above 45 psi, if you take a look at this piston here, what happens then is this piston moves down. When this piston moves down, it closes off the intake and opens up the exhaust. Any air that was in the brake chambers now gets vented out to atmosphere, and that's why you see the brakes start to apply, and at 45 psi they'll release. Once that happens, my brakes are released and the trailer is going to charge the reservoir, and this will stay in this condition until the reservoir is charged. We can move the trailer because the brakes will be released, and this is how we drive down the road. So under normal conditions, we're driving down the road, okay? Air pressure is holding this piston down. So what happens then is this valve is now a normal relay valve. So when I make a brake application, air pressure through the blue line comes in, acts on the top of this piston, This piston pushes down, closes off the exhaust, opens up the intake, and allows pressure from the reservoir to go out to make a brake application. When I release or lift the pedal up on the brake, this pressure is vented out to atmosphere. The spring pushes this piston back up. Intake will close, exhaust will open, and the brakes will release. So it acts just like a normal relay valve as we're driving down the highway. So what happens when we have an emergency application? So this is where this comes into effect. So again, remember, on the red line, anything above 45 psi is holding this piston down. So if I lose my air pressure off of my red line, what's going to happen then is the piston's going to pop up. The piston's going to pop up because I vented the air out of this red line. This spring pressure, because it can overcome, because there's no air pressure in there, that piston's going to pop up. What's going to happen then is my exhaust is going to close, my intake's going to open, trailer reservoir pressure, just like we were making a brake application, goes out and applies my trailer brakes. The one-way check pops up, and what it does is protects reservoir pressure. So once that red line is vented, no more air should come out of that red line. If we continually hear air coming out of that red line, it means that this one-way check has failed and it's going to drain the reservoir, and what will happen then is the trailer brakes will eventually release. So this is the emergency application. So again, this red line has to be vented in order for this piston to pop back up. Now, when we take a look at a brake chamber, a foundation brake, and this can be on the truck or the trailer, we have our brake pot, push rod, slack adjuster, camshaft, foundation brakes, drum. Now, when we take a look at the 121 system, so the 121 system has the same type of setup. It has a service line and a supply line. So when I push in the red button, air pressure is supplied to the trailer spring brake valve, and it does the same thing. It charges the trailer, and it also at the same time will release my maxis. So again, the 121 system has the maxi pots on them. And we have a separate relay valve for making a brake application. So if our red button is pushed in, our trailer brakes are released, and we can make a normal brake application. Now, can we compound trailer brakes? Well, if I don't have my red button pushed in, can I get air to my service line? No, because our tractor protection valve is not open. It will not allow air to come to my trailer. So I can't compound trailer brakes. It's impossible to do it. Now, trailer spring brake valves, again, there's different manufacturers. You don't need to know how each valve works. You have to understand what they do. So they will release my brakes, my spring brakes. They will charge the trailer. In the event that the trailer supply line, the red line, breaks, a couple things happen here. It will allow the springs to make a brake application and apply the brakes. It also has a one-way check that will protect my supply pressure in my reservoir, so I don't lose it back out the red line. Same thing happens in the RE6 valve. If that one-way check is gone, air will continue to vent out this trailer supply line, the red line. So trailer spring brake control valve does these things. Automatically applies the trailer brakes when the pressure in the trailer supply line is lost. Automatically applies the trailer spring brakes when the trailer supply line is lost due to application or part control supply valve. So if we pull the button out. It prevents compounding, because we can't have compounding, because anytime we push the red button in, we're releasing the brakes. Prevents the loss of trailer air pressure in the event of a breakaway. Again, the one-way check will prevent that from happening. And prevents automatic application of trailer spring brakes in the event of a loss of trailer service line. So again, if I lose my blue line, I just can't make an application on my trailer. So this is what the the 121 system looks like. And again, here's our check valve. So as I push in on my red button, this will actually protect this. Prevents the loss of trailer pressure. Now again, you don't have to understand how each one of these pistons move, because different manufacturers, they look different. Now this also, they say it has an anti-compound. Well, you can't compound trailer brakes. So it's impossible to do it, because once we charge our red line, it releases the brakes, so it can't compound. Now the other thing we might see is a converter dolly. So for instance, if we have two trailers, the back trailer is going to have a converter dolly underneath it with brakes on it. Now this system can have two different types of brake valves. It can have a relay emergency valve, the one that we looked at, the pre-121 system. It can also have a 121 system on it where it does have maxi pots. So if it has maxi pots on it, so what we're going to have again is a trailer spring brake valve on there, but we're going to have shut-off valves so that we can disconnect the trailer, leave it there, pull the front trailer and the converter dolly ahead. We can drop the converter dolly, and we can also, now that we have pressure in our reservoir, we can release the brakes and move our converter dolly around. So it all depends on what type of converter dolly we have. If we don't have spring brakes, again, we have an RE6 valve in the system, all we have to do is drain the air pressure of the reservoir and the brakes will release, and we can move it around. So the other thing we have to pay attention to is pressure losses in the system, and what's called cracking pressure. So for instance, when I make a brake application, I want my rear trailer to apply first, and so on all the way up to the tractor. That way the rear trailer can't swing out on me. So each valve will have what's called cracking pressure. Now the rear trailer, the cracking pressure may be almost zero, 1 psi, 2 psi. You can get valves with different cracking pressures. So for instance, let's just say I'm replacing a relay valve on a trailer. We need to know what that cracking pressure is so we can put the same valve on that trailer. For instance, a customer comes in and says, yeah, my front trailer brakes are applying before my rear trailer brakes. Chances are that the valve that's on the front trailer has the wrong cracking pressure. So again, we want to make sure that we get the trailer with the right cracking pressure on there. So how would I check that out? Well, like anything else that we're going to be checking with pressures, we're going to use a pressure gauge. And we can put a pressure gauge on the front trailer, on the converter dolly, and the rear trailer, and we can make a small brake application, and we can watch and see at what pressure it's allowing air pressure to go out to our brake chambers. Now pilot relay valves are a relay valve, so we're using a small amount of pressure to open this valve to allow us to make a brake application. So these are all relay valves, but they're classified as a pilot operated valve. Now there is another valve that's on, depending, it can be on a trailer and it can also be on a truck, and it's called a pressure protection valve. Now pressure protection valve is in the system and it's a normally closed valve, but once the pressure comes up above 85 to 90 psi, the valve opens and allows air to go to a secondary system. Secondary system could be a set of airbags on our tractor, or it could be a set of airbags on our trailer. So you start the vehicle, pressure's below 90 psi. As soon as it gets up close to 90 psi, the pressure protection valve is going to open, air suspension is going to lift, air seat might rise. So again, it all depends on what's on the downstream side of the pressure protection valve. So if, for instance, an operator complains that his airbags aren't lifting until they get to about 110, 115 psi, it could be the pressure protection valve is starting to fail or starting to stick. So take a look at how the system is set up and what's in there. This is usually connected to one of the supply tanks. And we've already looked at the relay emergency valve and how it works.